Yo, what's going down, Green Screen Entertainment fans? Ya homies back right now with my review for Morbius.
It's not good, okay? It's not good.
Alright, so this movie stars Jared Leto, Matt Smith, Adria Arjona, Jared Harris, Tyrese Gibson, and Al Madrigal. Now, this movie was directed by Daniel Espinosa. This cat brought us movies like Safe House and Life. However, Morbius was also written by Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, who gave us movies like Dracula Untold and The Last Witch Hunter. Now, for those of you out there who have no idea what Morbius is all about, we're basically following Jared Leto's character, Michael Morbius. He's like a world-renowned doctor who was born with a genetic blood-borne disease. Now, it doesn't really matter to me or to you or the writers what that disease actually is because they never mention it. But as he's on this lifelong mission to cure this disease, he ends up doing some work with some vampire bats. He does some genetic splicing, lickety-split. Next thing you know, he's a goddamn vampire. Now, as cliche would have it, in the beginning of the film, Michael Morbius is basically figuring out his abilities, his talents, all that type of stuff. Now, a friend that he grew up with back in the day that's like his best friend with the same exact disease, played by Matt Smith, starts to see him moving around in a different way, living his best life. He gets a little bit jealous. So what does he do? He ends up breaking into Michael Morbius' lab, takes his serum, and now he's got the vampire abilities. Enter our antagonist for the film. All right, so we're going to jump right into it like this. This movie was trash. It wasn't a complete dumpster fire. It's watchable, but let me tell you why I think it's trash and why I do not recommend that you go out to the theater to support this film, okay? Now, what did I like about this movie? I liked how it opens up. It opens up giving you some backstory to Michael Morbius and his friend played by Matt Smith. We understand what the disease is that they have. We understand how they're dealing with it, what it's like for them in the hospital, things of this nature, right? And we're hoping for the audience that they find a cure, okay? The doctor, played by Jared Harris, he was a great mentor to them as well. So we cut to now into the future, and we see Jared Leto's character healing people. You know, he's getting a Nobel Peace Prize, things of this nature. So I like that aspect that someone who has a disease would then take matters into their own hands, take ownership of that disease, and use it and the knowledge that he has of it to help other people as well as himself. That was good. All right, so what else did I like about this movie? And that's about it, I guess. Okay, now, let me get into what I thought was trash about this film and why I do not suggest that you go to the theater to check it out. Now, I will give you a warning right now that I'm going to get heavy with some spoilers. So if you do still want to go check this film out, you already know what I think about it. Go ahead, check it out. Come back here, comment below. Let me know what you thought about it. But for those of y'all who ain't tripping if I spoil it, stick around because I'm about to go in hard. All right, so number one, I don't like how they took a whole bunch of stuff out of the trailer. We're expecting this movie to be somehow tied in with Spider-Man, but for whatever reason, they took out all of that Spider-Man tie-in stuff. Whether it was going to be tied into the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the Sonyverse, it didn't really matter to me. I mean, quite frankly, I don't need everything to be tied in at this point any longer, but if you're telling me you're going to do that, I want you to fulfill on that promise. You feel me? The other thing that I had a problem with was really something that was kind of sprinkled throughout the film. And that was one thing that I hate in movies is when the surrounding characters or the surrounding environment are not acting in a realistic manner. I talked about this when I did that Deep Water review. They're not acting in a realistic manner to what's jumping off. Okay? When he starts turning into a vampire, he's not just a vampire and he's getting fangs. That's easy to disguise. His whole face, his whole demeanor is changing. This motherfucker's flying through the subway and there's like sonic booms and waves and ripples and all that type of stuff floating around his ass. It looks pretty cool. I'll give you that. But the people that are seeing him do it are like nonchalant. Look, I know a lot of crazy shit jumps off of New York, but goddamn, if you've seen a man flying in the subway, you at least gonna turn your head and be like, hold up, what the fuck? Now, another big issue that I had with this film was that we don't really get enough time to be in a vampire film in our vampire film. And what I mean by that is this. I don't know the character of Michael Morbius, right? So I'm not going to say that they did or didn't stay true to the comics or they ad-libbed here or there. It's whatever. But you're telling me he's a vampire. You got to give me a vampire movie. Now, you think about all the different vampire films that have been out there. Some of them are more fun and lighthearted, but a little bit creepy, like a Lost Boys or Vampire in Brooklyn with Eddie Murphy. It's actually underrated if you ask me personally. Check it out. And then you have those that are more serious, like a Dracula or an Interview with the Vampire. You could have picked either genre that you wanted to go with, but you got to give me some of that In this film, when he's kind of figuring out his vampire abilities, he kind of stumbles onto him, but yet can control him almost in an instant. I mean, even Superman and Zod, when they came to Earth, it took them a little bit of time to hone in on their skills, and they mentioned that. So I like in a movie like an Iron Man, or a Captain America, or something like a Batman Begins, where our hero or our anti-hero, whatever you want to call him, has to have a little bit of trial and error as they're using their abilities. He's like a G day one. Now, for the next thing that really grinded my gears was the fact that in the trailers, we see him land on a perch on the side of some mountain in Costa Rica. He's going into this big ass cave with all thousands of these vampire bats. And I guess these are going to be his test subjects. Now, the only problem I have with this particular scene is, number one, we never revisit the scene again. We don't see how he captures the bats. He only has a helicopter and like 3 dudes with him, and they ain't got no goddamn cages. We don't see how he transfers the bats out of a foreign country into America. And because last I checked, you got to go through customs, my G. Also, how did he get him into the lab? How does nobody know that these goddamn bats are in the lab and he's been doing studies on this shit? Is nobody fact checking his funding? Whatever. Anyways, point is, these are supposed to be just regular vampire bats that he picked up in Costa Rica. That's all we know about them. They don't have special abilities themselves. So what he does is he ends up splicing their genes with human DNA or whatever. Now, y'all remember a little movie came out back in the early 90s called Jurassic Park, when they found that mosquito and it had the dino DNA, but they had to then splice it with frog DNA. But it didn't make the dinosaurs start flying around. It didn't give the dinosaurs telepathic abilities. They're just some fucking dinosaurs. And that's all it was. So this movie is telling us he's basing everything off of actual science. However, the vampire bat DNA that he puts in with his DNA all of a sudden allows him to fly and have telepathic abilities and this and that. He can control bats and shit. He can bring people back to life and turn them into vampires too.
Man, this is some bullshit!
Now, staying on the same subject of science and logic, which this movie does not have any of, there's a scene in the trailer where he's fighting this black dude who's got a knife to him. He cripples this dude's arm, puts him down to his knees, and then he says he's Venom, and he's, oh, just kidding, I'm Michael Morbius. Now, they took that part out of the film as well. He doesn't actually say all of that, but he does take over their laboratory. Now, the lab that this guy was running was to make counterfeit money. He needs his lab to do all his scientific-y bullshit. So somehow they show us a super quick montage. And when I mean by super quick montage, I don't mean like over the course of days or weeks. I'm talking about like over the course of, 20 minutes. He basically takes this guy's counterfeit bill machine apart and then turns it into some kind of blood centrifuge.
Man, this is some bullshit!
Come on, man. What the fuck? That's not how counterfeit machines work. Another thing that kind of fell off when it comes to science and logic, if you will, is his friend Matt Smith. Let's revisit this guy, okay? Towards the end of the film, this guy turns into a shady ass, bloodthirsty, and not just because he's a vampire, murderer. Number one, he kills an innocent nurse that worked with Michael Morbius, that Michael Morbius actually liked. She wasn't causing no problems. She wasn't snooping in an area she's not supposed to be snooping in. But for some odd reason, he ends up going to the hospital and then kills her, but then frames his friend for it. Why? That's one of the issues that I had with this film, is there's so many things that leave the question, why? To be asked, okay? When his friend realizes what was jumping off with Michael Morbius, he says, oh shit, let me get that serum. Michael Morbius says, you don't know what I've done since I've taken this serum. It's made me turn into something I don't want to be. It's dangerous. It's not good for you. So it's not like a, hey, I don't want you to have it because it's all mine type of shit. He's realizing, damn, I don't know what I've done. I've gotten myself into some hot water. It's not good for you. Let me revamp it, whatever. We'll revisit that later. And then his friend leaves in a cower, right? But then he goes back and steals that shit. And then all of a sudden he's going to frame his friend. Why? Like, why do that? Then towards the end of the movie, not only did he frame his friend, but now he's just trying to like kill any and everybody. He don't give a fuck. He's running around like Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey from Batman Forever, acting like Two-Face and the Riddler, just goofy, dancing. He's got like a pristine suit, but then he's like blowing through walls and buildings and shit. Ain't a scratch on him.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the shit just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And then also, let's be frank, Matt Smith's character is not a doctor like Michael Morbius. So one, how did he know what serum it was for him to take that had been tested and was successful? Two, how did he administer the serum to himself when Michael Morbius had to have the doctor lady that he's working with administer it to him? This shit doesn't add up, playa. Now, a few things that don't even have really anything to do with the story per se, I got a real big problem with. Hans Zimmer is one of my favorite composers. We're talking about a guy who did Gladiator, he did the Dark Knight trilogy, he's worked with Nolan a lot on a lot of his films. Inception. So Inception, if y'all don't even really understand scores, you don't really pay attention to him that much, that's okay. I love that type of shit, right? He's the one that did the like, bah, and then every fucking trailer was using him. Hans Zimmer's been around. We know what his shit sounds like. There are scenes in this film when Morbius is like around bats or some shit, or definitely towards the end, towards some of the climax scenes and whatnot, where like the score from Dark Knight is straight lifted and put in this film, like egregiously. That shit to me was fucking disrespectful as hell, and it was shady as fuck. There's also scenes in this movie that are straight out of other films. When Matt Smith frames Morbius and he goes to visit him in the jail, he's got a cane, because remember, he's kind of crippled, right? He's supposed to be kind of crippled. But at this point in time, he's already taken the serum, and he's talking to Morbius like it's all good. It's basically a scene out of like Primal Fear or Usual Suspects, where they're showing him acting a type of way, and then as he's starting to leave the jail, he starts to change his demeanor. You start to see his foot kind of straighten up a little bit, and I'm like, hold the fuck up. Y'all have some
Brass ball.
balls
Brass ball.
balls to do that shit. All right, y'all, so these are going to be my closing arguments. I think that this movie had good things in it, but it did not deliver on the promise of its premise. This is supposed to be a vampire movie, but then you didn't give it any vampire shit, any real vampire shit. You didn't give it any blood, and you really did not connect us with any of the characters' relationships. You did in the beginning, but then you let that shit go as the movie went along. Even with the doctor that he was working with, we could tell that they got a little something something, but you didn't really develop it enough for anything that was jumping off between them to matter, okay? Also, this movie jumps right in to him being a vampire, and it doesn't give us, again, anything to connect with. What are his real struggles with being the vampire? How is this really going to affect his life moving forward? What if he didn't end up killing people and needing to drink blood, but then he was all good? What's he going to tell the world? It didn't give us any of that shit, okay? This movie has Tyrese Gibson in it. And in this movie, he's really trying hard. The only problem is they don't give him nothing to do. So this movie is basically an amalgamation of what the studio thought we would want to see.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. Oh no.
And what the studio thought would be able to create the Sinister Six for the next Spider-Man movie that they decided to come up with. And I think that that was a horrible decision on their part. The end credit scenes are the cheesiest, most ridiculous, most shoehorned in end credit scenes that I've ever seen in my entire life. Yeah, so with all that said,
I don't want to talk about this again.
this is not worth a trip to the theater. Save your dollar. Wait till you catch it on FX for free $99. Yo, your homie, Jay Green, I'm out.